Yes, good evening. Welcome. My name is Ray Douglas, and this is day two of the Equity Festival, the Equal Equity Program in partnership with the National Youth Agency. And I always say this, you know me, but today I think we've got, I know in fact we've got a unique episode coming up. And if we could capture the ethos of the Equity Festival, it would be with our guest today, Charlie Dark, aka Daddy Dark. Let's go for it. DJ, poet, community organizer, disruptor, brand ambassador, yoga teacher, all of that, right? So we had a little conversation about the yoga teacher with your family prior to us going live. So welcome to the Equity Festival, Charlie.
Thank you very much for having me.
Ourselves and NYA. So for those who don't know you, who is Charlie Dark?
I guess Charlie Dark at this current incarnation is a Renaissance man, and he wakes up and gets to do Charlie Dark, which means that I've worked very hard to kind of get to a position where I get to work with who I want to work with, how I want to work with them, and do the kind of work and projects that excite me. It's been quite a long journey to get to this point.
So let's start at the very beginning then. Where does that journey start?
That journey starts in the 80s in South London. I am the son of Ghanaians who came over to the UK via New York in the late 60s and settled in South London. One of the unique things about my perspective on life and the way that I operate is when it came time to choose secondary schools, I wanted to go to the local comprehensive school. But my mum, because she is from a kind of family of educators and education is very important to her, decided that she was going to try and get me into the local private school. So I applied to get an assisted place. I managed to get a scholarship to go. So I was in a school of maybe 1,000 to 1,500 children. There may be probably 4 black kids in the school in the whole time I was there.
Wow.
And I think what that did for me is it kind of gave me an understanding and an awareness of the system at a very early age and how you navigate the system for your advantage and how you navigate the system to survive.
Yeah.
And not only survive, but also thrive as well. I think many of us, we are surviving, but we are not thriving.
So was that your first encounter of you're different, or
no?
Was that your first encounter of hold on a minute, I have to turn up in the best version of myself? What was that experience like for those who wouldn't have had that experience?
I think one of the things that I was told every day is that you have to try twice as hard. And my mum used to send me off to school every day with a quotation, which is, "The heights achieved by great men were not attained in a sudden flight, but they, whilst their companions slept, were toiling bravely in the night." I've got it on my arm. It's actually like tattooed on my arm. I think that became like a mantra and manifesto that basically, you know, in order to succeed in this environment, I had to turn up with my A game. I think there was also, I was really influenced by Daley Thompson, the athlete Daley Thompson. And one thing that was really struck me was that he would always train on Christmas Day. And I found that really fascinating. And I think his whole thing was, if I can train on the hardest day of the year when most people are celebrating, then that helps me on my path to being invincible.
And Daley's slept on, isn't he? When we talk about Daley, like for what he achieved back then, and you know, and I mean, I know he's still active in one sense, but from a historic perspective, he was out there on his own.
Yeah,
I mean, he's pre-Linford, isn't he? He's pre-everybody.
Yeah, he's people definitely don't give people like him his props or realize how significant people like that are, because they were the only ones. You know, like Trevor McDonald. It's kind of
Yeah.
You know, most kids were getting sent to bed at 9 o'clock. So to actually finally be allowed to stay up until 10 and to realize that the voice that you heard coming through the wall into your bedroom was actually a black guy on national TV was just like, hold on a minute, this is amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. Which speaks to that mantra that Marduk sent you out with and what's on your arm, right? That really, that's what it captures. So 16, I assume there's going to be some young people going to watch this. They won't know about O levels. They won't know about YTS. They won't know about the Thatcher years.
Yeah.
So what went down at 16? Left school.
Well, at 16, there was no way I was being allowed to leave school at 16. I actually wanted to join the army because I was really kind of into the military, and I was an army cadet. And
yeah, me too. What was your signal? What was your Fusilier or signal?
I was in the infantry.
Oh, I was a signal. I hope when I look at it now, I think that could have been cannon fodder if I joined the army. You know, but
I wanted to join the paratroopers.
All right. Okay. Yeah.
But I went to junior leaders to apply. They said to me, "You're too intelligent." And also, the guy actually admitted to me that the army are really racist, so you're going to have a very hard time. This is like 1986. He was just like, "Actually, are you sure you really want to do this?" So I stayed on to do my A levels, and I didn't manage to get into Oxbridge, or Cambridge, much to my mum's. It was almost like her whole life had been about kind of funneling me to this moment, and I couldn't do it. But luckily, I had music to kind of get into, and being one of the only black kids in this environment, people kind of assumed that I knew more about music than I actually did.
Okay.
Although I had been growing up with music, I wasn't like, taking it to a deeper level of research. I was into all the electro and the soul like the rest of my friends. So when people started, I distinctly remember someone saying to me, "I'm having a 16th birthday party and, you look like you're into music, so can you DJ?" I was just like, yeah, okay, cool. And that's when it really kind of struck me, because I think for a lot of people of color, when you grow up with culture in your house, it's all around you. And it could be anything. It can be, having a gramophone.
Yeah.
Example. So you already know about the beauty of analog sound. It's not something you're like, oh my God, analog is the best. You've just grown up with having great speakers, great stereo culture. It's something that you've grown up with. So I think for me, it was like, all these records that these people are freaking out about, this rare groove stuff that, the white guys I know are like hunting the country for. I'm like, it's all in my house.
Yeah.
I just didn't consider it to be rare groove. It was just music. It was just black music. Yeah. So I became one of the school DJs. I had a little DJ crew.
What was yours called? I can give you my one's name.
What was your one?
Militant Sound Federation.
Mine was actually called Blaxploitation.
Wow. Wow. So we got this. Look at this. So we and some of my friends who will watch this back, and we were actually that group of friends who did the school disco. Now, sorry to digress, and take it away from you. But what happened was you talk about yours was called Blaxploitation. Every school disco that we had, I went to a fairly mixed school, but every school disco that we had, it was the Smiths, it was Bon Jovi, and it was we had a lot of Gothics in my year, so we had to kind of go to and say, look, with flat high tops and African pendants, say, look, we've got to have a 50-50 here. And before you know it, Rebel Without a Pause is blasting out the school disco. So it's interesting, right? We're from different parts of the world in terms of the UK, but it's the same thing, right?
It's the same, People are always freaked out when they come and hear me DJ, and I might play a Cure record or a Slip of Simple Minds in there, or Talking Heads, and they're like, "Why are you playing this?" or Roxy Music. I'm like, bro, this is the music. I was taking it all in, it's kind of, you're with people who are kind of listening to everything. So it was just a melting pot. Okay. So that was kind of, the formative DJ years and formative education. And then I, decided I'm going to go to uni, kind of really messed up my A levels. So I didn't get into Warwick. and ended up going to Brunel. And I went because you could get a student loan, and at that point you'd have to pay. It was like, for me, I looked at it as like, okay, I'm gonna have some bit of freedom. I'm gonna be able to live by myself or live in halls, and I'm gonna have the student grant that's gonna allow me to invest into my art, my passion. And so that's the reason why I went. I went to study English and drama, and I really wanted to become an actor. But unfortunately, and I think this is a really important point to make for especially younger people who are watching this, is I went to school with Jude Law. Jude Law was in the year below me, and he's a famous Hollywood actor now. But even at the age of 16, he was in the sitcom. I was just like, yo, like, he's getting in to the industry. At that point, you weren't really seeing black actors on TV. So I'm just like, okay, well, if I pursue this route, I'm going to end up on the bill. I'm going to be playing burglars and criminals. My options are limited in the acting world. And that's one of the other things that kind of pushed me more into doubling down on really kind of trying to, make it in the music industry. Because I was like, it was one of the few places, particularly because, urban culture, black music, streetwear was really beginning to bubble up at that time. So you were seeing these opportunities happening. And there was also this kind of punk aesthetic where you were kind of meeting people who were at art school or were living in a squat, but they were making things happen on very limited resources, and they were pooling together with different people to make things happen and to make change. And that was really inspiring to me, being in that kind of environment. And I think, again, one of the things that's been to my advantage, because I just kind of grew up with a very firm sense of who I was, but also very open to opportunities that could be had when you started hanging out and speaking and having conversations with people who were different from you.
And so uni kind of got you into that kind of meeting other communities, obviously different classes, different. Well, you've obviously from your school background, but getting out of London, kind of for the most part,
I studied in London, but I moved from south to west. I was in West London, and West London was a bit different. You had Kingston Art College was there. Kingston College there. It was it was a bit more, and you were nearer Notting Hill, so it was just it was a different type of energy.
You was introduced to falafel and all of that. I know the feeling.
Came into my life, and also the job that I got as an 18-year-old. When I left school, I wanted to be a cycle messenger. And my mum. This
will go over a lot of people's heads,
Yeah, they're going to go.
The cycle messenger was. I'm not saying it was the influencer, but you'd always point at. Look,
the cycle messengers at that point had the keys to every building.
Oh, they were the PT. They were the 20. They were the PT. They were that high level PT,
yoga
right?
teacher. Yeah. So she said, she wouldn't allow me to become a cycle messenger. She thought it was too dangerous. So I ended up becoming a hairdressing assistant at a salon in Soho. And again, that was a very deliberate decision by myself, where I just thought to myself, I want to be in media. I want to be in the music industry. Most of that is based in the centre of London, in Soho. The common thing that all of those people have is that a lot of those people are white, and they all have to get their hair cut. And so if I can insert myself in the salon where they go to get their hair cut, doors are going to start opening up for me. And so I went and I looked through ID magazine. I was like, right, which is the place? All right, DMOP, brilliant, cool. And I went there, put on my best Stussy t-shirt, walked myself uptown, and literally was just like, look, there's a change happening in London. Streetwear's coming in. Black culture's coming, is going to be the thing. I'm going to look cool in the shop. It's just like, I'm going to look cool in the shop. And so, we worked out a deal, and that's kind of, one of the big things that happened. And I met Malcolm McLaren on day one.
All right.
And for those who are unaware of Malcolm McLaren, former husband of Vivienne Westwood, manager of the Sex Pistols. He made this amazing kind of hip hop collage album called Duck Rock with a load of African musicians and musicians from around the world.
3 Buffalo Girls go around the outside.
And all of that. And I remember he walked in. I was just like, yo, this is like day one. Malcolm McLaren's just come in. And I'm bugging out. And he, you know, he was just kind of like very normal, very matter of fact. No persona, just himself.
Yeah.
And he was like, you know, I was asking him the radio on the cover of the Duck Rock album, like, where could I get one? Where can I buy one? And he was just like, yo, if you want to, you know, just make it. It's like, if you want to ever get anything done, just do it yourself. Do as much as you can yourself before you ask for help. Really important advice, because I think a lot of people now, they have these amazing ideas that never get off the ground because they go and seek funding or they go and seek endorsement from a brand or, you know, the involvement of certain people before they actually can make it happen. But my thing's always been like, we'll sort that stuff out later. Let's just get the idea up and rolling. And Westwood came in as well. That was another thing. You know, Westwood came in same day. And I'm like, he's not talking in his radio voice.
Yeah.
And that really bugged me out. I was just kind of like, okay, so people have public personas and private personas. That was kind of a really big thing for me. Like this idea that people were inventing these characters. And a lot of these people were from out of London and they were coming to London and reinventing themselves. He's talking to me about stocks and shares and you know, saving money. I'm just like, yo, Tim, I want to talk about the latest.
Yeah. And that was what year was that?
This is 1989.
So I mean, that Westwood was obviously not this Westwood.
Yeah, he's the number one DJ, hip hop DJ in the country at that time.
And without, I think then he was really for the culture.
Yeah.
If do you understand what I'm saying? Like, For those of us who have seen the different decades.
Yeah.
So first day one in a the word bougie wasn't around then, but in a top end hair salon in Soho, Malcolm McLaren walks in, Westwood walks in. You've basically you reached the promised land, right?
I'm like, you know what I mean? You can pay me £15 a day. Wicked, cool. I'm like, I'm here, I'm doing it. And that was a really important job for me because again, it allowed me to meet different types of people and not be fazed by people who were famous or deemed to be important. You know, this idea that when you're in my house, all of that doesn't matter because you're in my place there.
Yeah.
And that was a kind of a really great job. And I worked as a, you know, learning to be a hairdresser for many, many years. And eventually that led to a job with Channel 4.
Okay.
The Word. So this is pre, I'm still DJing.
Yeah.
You know, but I'm really thinking, okay, TV, maybe I can get into TV. But I worked on The Word.
All right. So
I
Danny
worked on the
Bear
episode at Shabba Ranks, you know, the Shabba Ranks episode, the infamous MC Hammer episode, Snoop Dogg, first Oasis TV performance, a whole lot of people. But the thing that I didn't have was I didn't have a passion for TV. And I didn't like the way that they would stitch up people from our culture. Yeah.
Literally.
And you know, there was a situation where they did a piece on the Desert Eagle gun. Yeah, with Black Moon. So I got the Black Moon Connect through contacts I had. But, you know, I remember kind of seeing it and being like, so you literally went to New York with, you know, you hired a Desert Eagle and then you opened it up in front of them and filmed their reaction. And that was the piece. You didn't ask them about the music. You didn't ask them about the culture. And that was kind of, I was like, you know what, I'm done. And then when we did the Snoop Dogg episode after that, I was like, I'm really done. I'm not in this. Yeah. And they didn't renew my contract. But they asked me if I wanted to come back, and I was just like, I don't want to do it. Yeah. And look at that. I mean, we've never spoke about that. Yeah. And as soon as you've said the Desert Eagle piece, I remember it was Black Moon. I remember even Buckshot Shorty was wearing I think he was wearing a deerstalker hat. Yeah. He was wearing something like that, or like a Burberry type hat, and definitely wearing a flat cap type thing. And it's interesting you say that because I'm thinking back then watching it as a youth, it was all about
it was all about the gun,
Yeah.
as opposed to who got the props and how they broke into and independence and interesting. This is what I'm saying. When quite often when we say to people, when we live parallel lives as young people in Britain, we really do. You know, the word was an interesting place, as you said,
Yeah.
because we always watched it in my peer group. We always watched it hoping that you'd probably get a Run DMC. You might even
Yeah.
get a Caliphs. You got a Caliphs, I remember, an
Yeah.
early Cypress Hill. And then the rest of it was kind of independent, kind of all types of stuff. It was a groundbreaking program. But also prior to that, I think I speak to some of the we had Dance Energy,
Yeah.
Normski, once again another kind of person who was out there on his own. So I mean, and you know, and being a northern soul that I am, we often kind of just sat back and had to watch London do it.
Yeah.
There was, you know, so it's interesting you say that. So when you thought, okay, this isn't for me, this isn't landing with my values and something ain't right, what happened after the word?
I met James Lavelle.
Okay.
I met James Lavelle in a record shop in West London called Honest John's.
Mm-hmm.
And we kind of immediately kind of clicked, because around about 92, I started falling out of love with American hip hop, the culture of it, because I started going to New York a lot more frequently. I'd always gone as a child, but between 89 to like 94, I was in and out all the time. I worked in the school dinner's kitchen as another job to kind of get, you know, courier flights, £200. Was going. And the New York I was discovering was different from the New York I was hearing on record, and different from the New York that was being written about. And I just suddenly was just like, you know what, this kind of hyper macho, super violent, super sexist, super homophobic kind of all the, like, it doesn't appeal. I'm living in South London in my mum's house. Like, I don't have a gun, don't have a car, don't have a fly girl, don't have a chain. And every time you go to hip hop jams, you're literally walking with your heart in your mouth, because you don't know whether you're gonna get home safely, because there's always some form of altercation popping off.
So you're talking 92, 93?
Yeah, I'm talking like 92, 93. And then
so 93 Slam, right? Onyx.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
I was involved in the company that brought Onyx over, and it was the defining moment for kind of Birmingham, but also we didn't go to the London leg, but if my memory serves me right, there was a mini riot.
Yeah.
It
was always, yeah, it was either Nice and Smooth. I mean, everything I went to, there was some form of people bum rushing the door, some form of agginess between the different, you know, because as I always say, at that point, London was still relatively north, south, east, west.
Okay.
You'd go to the concert, Chuck D's like, North London makes some noise.
Yeah.
The section goes up. It hadn't become this segregated, like, Southwark, you know, Tower Hamlets, Newham, and then subsequently into this, you know, Peckham, Brixton, and so on and so forth. At that point, it was South London.
Yeah, and people have to recognise that, you know, that Public Enemy, that it takes a nation of millions, is recorded intertwined with the London concert.
Yeah.
Which was so unique.
Yeah, and London changed the day after that concert.
Yeah,
it was never the same.
Definitely.
I think people's kinds of people just woke up and decisions were made. Like, you saw Die Hard, you know, people suddenly turn Muslim next day. Yeah. Some people turned, you know, 5%ers. It was just kind of like people just started break. You know, some people were like, you know what, I'm done with hip hop, acid house. That's me.
Yeah.
You know, so people kind of started dividing. And I was going to, like, you know, the jazz dance thing. I was kind of really into that. The Red Groove thing, I was into that. The warehouse party thing, early house, I was into that. So my thing had always just been this kind of jumping about. But when I met James, it was like I'd met someone who kind of, you know, wasn't from London, was super young, because he was like 16, 17.
Yeah.
And what I really liked about him is like this lack of respect for gatekeepers and authority, which I really identified with. The idea of rebellion. and
Okay.
this idea that if everyone else is going right,
Yeah.
we're going left.
Mm.
When everyone else is playing Pete Rock and CL Smooth, we're playing this new group called Wu-Tang. You know, it's kind of, and he was like, I'm starting this record label. You look like you're into hip hop. Can you make me some records? And by that point, Malcolm McLaren's inside my head, just being like, yeah, just say yes and work out how to do it tomorrow.
Mm.
And then that's how the Attica Blues kind of thing had kicked in.
So
and it was running in parallel with the Urban Poet Society. Thank you
for the Attica Blues. In the intro, I didn't mention the signed artist, the venture into the industry. So for those who don't know, Attica Blues, and there's a lot of parallels in our life, Charlie, because as a very young man, me and a few of my friends, we were signed to Beggar's Banquet, which is a subsidiary of XL Records.
Yeah.
So I the 7 people removed. I say, yeah, well, look now, you've got Adele on XL. I was signed to Beggar's as a kid.
What under what name?
Oh no! Don't. People ask me that all the time.
That I do know for a fact.
Well, it was the same. It was the same time as Fundamental, and it was the same time as MCM Caveman and that kind of era.
Yeah.
But but you get signed. That's an independent. Was you signed to a major or an independent?
We got signed to an independent first. Got signed to Mowax first, and then got signed. Kind of messed around with A&M, and then we signed to Sony, the big major label deal.
Wow.
So as I always say to people, is kind of I was in the music industry in its heyday when the amount of money flying around was ridiculous. It was a ridiculous kind of period of time when people were having excessive amounts of remixes done of records and spending excessive. It was quite a wild and innocent time, and it's definitely something that is a really important part of of why I do what I do. Because again, when I went to Mowax, what I learned was there were kind of people who were different from you out there who, when they get into a culture, when they have an interest in something, they go so deep that unless you go deep too, you'll never be able to compete because they will out-knowledge you. And it's to a point where it becomes embarrassing that you don't actually know about your own culture as much as they do.
Yeah.
And I remember being in the office one day and we were talking about techno music. And coming from hip hop, I was just like, oh man, techno, man, that's just kind of white raver kid music, man. And someone was like, this white guy was like, no, man, this, techno is like from the birthplace is Detroit. It's blah blah blah, and Derek May and Jan Atkins, Underground Resistance, and news people. And I'm like, for me, I'm just kind of, again, it's that thing where you're in it, so you don't think it's special because you're just like, oh, there it's Derek May and it's Jan Atkins and it's Cybertron and it's kind of those mad.
Todd, bro, listen. Anyone that understands, we were playing Todd Terry at school discos.
It's just Todd Terry. But then again, I was like, yo, man, like these guys, like they're deep. They're actually they're going to Detroit.
And
they're signing deals with these people and they're licensing records and they're immersing themselves in the culture and they're coming back. And it was at that point where you could see the pull away starting to happen. Like certain people that you'd either gone to school with or grown up with or raved with, what they were doing was suddenly going to a next level. And that's in a next level in success, fees, opportunities, and it was a real like, yo, like, okay, you got to be serious about this thing. But I think the major label life just messed with my head and with my soul.
Yeah, bro. Look,
definitely.
I've sat there as a youngster with an A&R, with no support mechanism around me and my friends. We've just had a desire for that. I think we, one of our claim to fame was with that. We supported Rhyme Syndicate when they came as youth, as kids.
Yeah.
Rebel MC, Brand Nubia, all that. But we were kids when I look back at it. We had a publishing deal. We had a chaperone, and we used to just drive up to London every few weeks and tell them how many demos we'd made and come back. And every month we'd get a clearance in our bank. But there was no care around the edges, none at all.
Yeah.
So you're little bit older than me. So what did that feel like? I mean, obviously, you got signed to a major. How was that?
I mean, the major label life when you first sign is amazing, because suddenly there's the next layer of the chamber that is unveiled to you. You're eating more, you're eating dinner in more expensive places. There are more courses. There are more guests. There's more knives and forks to navigate. There's more etiquette to kind of get your way around.
Yeah.
It's cars, it's trainers, it's records, it's trips, it's spending money because you're making ridiculous amounts of money. So you're kind of spending ridiculous amounts of money. But for me, I think, when the rug got pulled out and I suddenly realized that this band wasn't going to be as successful as we'd hoped it would be. And
what year are we talking?
This is like 2000, 2001.
Okay.
We're on the second album.
All right.
And
so
again, it's kind of at that point, I was still in my kind of hardcore, like, I'm going to make the music I want to make.
Yeah.
Trying to bend people to my will. I was still the DJ who'd be like, yeah, you're loving this record, but I'm about to play some avant-garde, Art Ensemble of Chicago record next because you need to hear it at this time.
Yeah.
And I was clearing dance floors, but just being really like, really dark, and this is how we're rolling. And it's really funny coming back to DJing the second time around because my approach to it is so much more different now. And I can see the benefits of the way that I'm doing it now and how it's unlocking, and it's just more fun and more enjoyable, and there's more connections with people than before when I was still a bit in this kind of like, the box.
Yeah.
Got to stand it's folded at all times and be hard. It's like, and that's one of the things I say to people is kind of, don't allow the narrative that's thrust upon you to define you.
You know what's really jumping out at me, Charlie?
Yeah.
You can almost connect the dots to where you are today. I mean, we've got a big piece of it, but when you've gone like this, and Robert Greene talks about this a lot in his work around mastery and impact and getting where you need to get, and being in close proximity to those you need to be in close proximity to, without selling out, but just being the embers off them and what they stand will almost be a student and get in and around the masters.
Yeah.
To get that 10,000 hours in.
Yeah, definitely.
And so the label thing, and I said there's many people from that era who were in spitting distance of that place, another place that you're referring to. You can see everyone, you can see all the A-list, you can see them, you're bumping into them, you're nodding, but yeah, and it's very much probably it's like an academy footballer.
Yeah.
That you realize that, and I'm going to say this, when we look back at it, a lot of, especially because black music then wasn't like the way it is now, totally different. It was still, we're still trying to convince an industry. I believe a lot of those early, not yourself, I was pre that, a lot of those, the testing that they did were tax write-offs. Because, why I say that, because there was never going to be, it was never going to be substantial, because they had those big artists, and obviously they did the seed investment on these new sounds, and but there wasn't that care around the edges, man. So I know when you came to that, obviously that crossroads of, I don't know where did you split up? Did you leave the band or whatever you decided to do? What went on? Where did you go? What did you do?
For me, my mental health just started to get really bad. And it was at a time when people weren't talking about mental health. And I didn't even want to put it down to mental health, because I was just like, if you grow up in an African family, the idea of depression is like, it doesn't exist.
It's in the same. It's in the same queue as Jamaica. The same queue.
They're just like, your elders are just like, it doesn't exist. And so there was no one I could talk to. But what I knew was I was really unhappy and I was pretty lost. And so I think what happened, I started picking up the pen again and writing, getting back into the spoken word, and really kind of getting into the teaching and working with young, because what I realized is that for most of my life, I'd been gearing up for this moment that actually hadn't happened, that had actually been quite disappointing in the end. And I really just didn't want other young people to go and have the same experience. And so around this time, it's 2001, 2002, grime is starting to kind of really kick in. And I'm working in a lot of schools in East London. I'm working with a lot of kids whose older brothers were into grime. So because of that, they had this passion for language and words that we hadn't really seen in schools before. And the poetry saved me. And a combination of the poetry and the start of the running journey is what got me through, and the birth of my first, my children as well. That kind of got me through the first part of, the 2000s. Because because what I realized is there's nothing really amazing when you meet people who were big in the 80s or big in the 90s and they're still talking about what they used to do then. And when because often what happens is people come to me and they're like, oh, really, can you help me get to this position? And you're kind of trying to tell them how things are done now. And they're saying to you, but, well, I recorded at this studio. I recorded at Abbey Road, or I in the 80s, I did blah, 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 blah. Or in the 90s, I was signed to blah, blah, blah. And they just don't understand. And they're looking at all the young kids around them who are kind of literally going from bedroom to like O2 quick. And they can't understand how it's done. And you're just like, I suddenly realized I don't want to be one of those people who my legacy is something that I did 10 years ago, 20 years ago. So my whole thing is kind of, what are you doing right now? And what I realized is I could take the skills that I'd learned from music industry, DJing, putting on parties, and apply that to the spoken word and the and the running life, which essentially is like, I like building communities. I like to build communities around what I'm doing. When I first got into music, what I loved about it is when you would, you go to someone's house, only one person in the neighborhood would have decks. You'd all go to their house and practice.
It sounds like you grew up in Birmingham to me.
Or only one person would have a drum machine, so you'd all go to that person's house. So when the rise of social media is coming, and laptops are getting faster, and studios are closing down, and people are doing stuff in their bedrooms, and all that, I missed being around people. So it's all about, my thing is always about kind of trying to create communities around the things that interest me.
So, and that's interesting as in the title of today's session, around how to build the tribe. So unpack the poetry segue to running. Because that obviously, now those are two different spaces.
I got commissioned by Birmingham Rep Theatre to write a one-man show called Have Box Will Travel about my music career up until that point and the birth of my daughter. My daughter's called Naima. She's named after John Coltrane record. So I get commissioned by Birmingham Rep Theatre. Benji Reid is brought on board to be the director. And we're in week 1 of rehearsals. And I literally walk in. I'm like, I'm Charlie Duck. Like, DJ, Mo Wax, Sony Records, blah, blah, blah. I mean, this Benji Reid dude. And I've known Benji for a very long time. But I definitely came in. My ego walked into the room before. Because I was scared. I'm kind of like, I'm killing the spoken word thing. Now I've got to go and work with this. They've been forcing me to have a director. I don't want to have a director. I don't need a director. And the first thing he says to me is like, you're not fit enough to play the amount of characters in this show. I'm like, what are you talking about, man? I'm like, I'm Charlie Duck. Do you mean I never really thought about my body in that way? And so what I realized is kind of, you're going to be on stage for an hour and a half and you're jumping up and down, because I just thought I was going to go on there and deliver a nice, pretty monologue, keep on doing what I'm doing. But he was like, right, we're stepping you out of your comfort zone. You're going to dance, you're going to move, you're going to bring characters to life. And that's going to require you to have some cardio, which you do not have. Again, very important to have people in your circle who are honest.
Yeah.
And and tell you how it is. Because I think one of the things that happens when you start becoming successful is you get more and more yes people around you because they don't want the gravy train to stop.
Yeah.
So the fitness started because I was so embarrassed by the fact that this guy had literally just called me out. It was just like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I literally went and got, I came home back to London because we were rehearsing in Birmingham, looked at my trainer collection, which is massive. I was just like, right, those shoes have only ever been worn in the club, but it says on the box that they're running shoes. But take those basketball shorts and that hoodie, and let's go outside and go and run. And the rest, I say, is history. It's one of the best things that I've ever done in my life because it helped put an umbrella on so many other interests that I had. Could suddenly sit underneath this running banner because my thing was when I went to the running shop, I was just like, I don't like the clothes. There is no running culture. When you go on the runs, everyone's just talking about times and distance. No one's talking about how the run is informing what's going on in your life and how it's making you sleep better or how it's improving your confidence so you're less reactionary to the world outside your door. And that was really important because I was from South London and I'm African and I was angry. And I'd grown up in this fight or flight thing where it's like must defend oneself at all times.
Yeah. Yeah.
Threat. And when you don't have the physical stature to protect yourself, your tongue and your demeanor becomes your armor. So you really are becoming Charlie Dark. Like there's like a dark halo, like the Ready Wreck Man around you.
Yeah. A famous advert.
Yeah.
So entering into that running world, what was the first thing that you noticed?
The first thing I noticed that it was a long time since I'd ever had to become a beginner. And that was very humbling for me, but very important because obviously by that point I've been, I started DJing in like 1983. So by the time you get to like 2003, I'm deep in the game.
Yeah.
Spoken word was always easy to me. It was easy for me to put words together and go and perform and do them, So, but now I've got this running thing, which is I've got to physically leave my house and be outside in public. People can see me failing. And so it helped me deal with my ego in a really, really important way. And it just allowed me to be more open to new people, new experiences and knowledge. And I think it's always really important every few years, you've got to do a Miles Davis. You've got to change up the people you're rolling with.
Yeah.
And start getting into some other interests just to keep your brain and your spirit, more importantly, active. And what I found when I was around running people, it was like the type of people I was meeting, they were different from music people.
Yeah.
They were a bit more open to the world. They weren't so set in their ways. And, again, when I realized that there were other people around the world who were doing similar things, who we all had back connections via music. So the guy in New York, Mike Sage, who set up the New York Bridge Runners, like the first running crew in the world, he used to run the New York Hip Hop Museum.
Okay.
Ex-graffiti writer, rolling with Futura, Mayor, Rocksteady, all these people. Then there's a guy in Amsterdam called Edson, and he used to work at Fat Beats and he runs Pata. Again, another big music head. And then you suddenly start realizing, okay, there's a Berlin crew and they've come from this angle. And then, and then it was a really exciting time because again, it reminded me of like the early days of hip hop where you could tell, you'd go to a place and look at someone's feet and immediately it was like you were brothers.
Yeah. So was you welcomed into the running culture, or did you have to kind of?
No.
Was it the Baby Sham moment? You remember that advert where the black man walks in and that piano stops and everyone's waiting to like what? And he's like, I'll have a Baby Sham. Did you kind of was it straight disruption?
It was straight disruption from day one because I basically went to a race and the way that people looked at me when I get out of my car. Because I had like I had a Renault 5 GTX, super fast, hot hatch, speakers in the back. I'm rolling in, music's we're Public Enemy up the place. We jump out, we've got the Air Force Ones, basketball shorts, and we're, you know what I mean? And we're excited to be there, and everyone's looking at me. And I was just like, you know what? This just reminds me of like the being on the first day of school.
Okay.
Watch what I do to these people. And again, so I immediately, day one, I just went home and I was like, right, I don't like the clothes. What am I going to do about that? I'm going to design my own clothes. Boom. Okay, well, if I design my own clothes, I'm going to need to have some people to wear them. So I'm going to need to assemble a crew of people. And that's when I came home and you know, thought about this idea of a crew, of bringing the crew to life. And I almost cast it like a modeling shoot. People don't realize with everything that I do, it's very deliberate, because I'm looking at it from a DJ's point of view. And I realize the one thing I realized from DJing at private school parties is they got really good when the rude boys turned up. When you're playing at some posh girls party in Hampstead, and then, you know, the local rude boys turn up, and then some punks turn up, and then some new romantic kids turn up, you know, and then suddenly you've got this room full of lots of different cultures and attitudes, but they're united by this love of music, and they all contribute to the party in a slightly different way. And that's what creates this magical atmosphere. It's like DJing at a wedding. It's intergenerational, and that's what gives the magic. So immediately I was like, right, if we don't photograph these runs, people won't believe we're doing them. We need a photographer. Got my mate who's a photographer. I was like, look, we're going to start this little running thing. You down? He comes in. Had my mate who makes music, because like, we need a soundtrack, because, you know, I want to roll with music. Got my friend who was a dancer. You know, I was like, because he's the only one who knew anything about a body, so he knew about stretches. And then you have to bring in the guy who say yes to anything. Yeah. And that's how we rolled. You know, the five of us, Scare Dem Crew, just started. Friday night, we'd run 1 mile, post it on Facebook, and be proud. And then we'd go and DJ or do whatever we were doing. And it literally just grew from there. But also I learned, you know, you got to incubate this idea for as long as you can, so that by the time people find out about it, they already know it works. Yeah. Because this is another thing that people try and do. It's like they try and go for help or assistance or opportunities, and they haven't actually proven to themselves or to their, you know, their little world that the idea actually worked. Yeah. So by the time like people knew about Run Dem been going for a year. Yeah. That proof of concept. That's what we're talking about, right? Having that proof of concept. Yeah. So I was just like, you know, when I started having brand meetings, I was just like, well, you can't tell me it doesn't work, because I know it works, because I've got 30 people who come and run with me every week. Yeah. And the one thing I know about, you know, popular culture is it doesn't like it when there's something happening that it doesn't know about. That's really poignant, because that kind of speaks to pre this current wave of black music being accepted in the UK, where you know, where they didn't know what to do with it. Now they know what to do with it. Everyone's on board. But 7-8 years ago, even though there was little, you know, but now, you know, there's a big conversation we have about the culture and what's accepted and what's not. So you took those skills of Attica and of a DJ and of also being amongst different communities, and you applied them into the running. You branded it, you captured it. At its peak, do you want to share with the viewers, what did it look like, Scare Dem Crew? Because I know, as I said, I've just posted a picture of you on Twitter, and it was multiple medals. So it went beyond running the streets of London. It went to marathons, right? Yeah, it was running marathons all around the world with people from all around the world. We started an event called Bridge the Gap in 2012, where we would pick a race in a country, and then we'd send out the bat signal and be like, right, meet us on the start line. And you'd literally have hundreds of people from different crews around the world, you know, training for this race. And then we go there, do the race, and then we have a party afterwards. And it was all about bridging the gap between sport and lifestyle and culture. And my thing was, I didn't want to be part of what the running world were doing. I was like, what you're doing is boring. You know, it's like, I'm not, you know, and that was one of my big things, is because I never ever went there with like, oh, please, running world, accept me. It was, if anything, was the other way around. It was like, we're going over here to go and do our own thing. If you want to come and join us, you're going to join us on our terms, not the other way around. I wasn't looking for validation from the running world. And, you know, in the same way, I don't look for validation from the wellness world. In the same way, I don't look for validation from the music world or the DJ world now. Because I'm like, I can do what you do, but can you do what I do?
But when the corporates came knocking,
yeah,
because it's the same thing, right? When you did the demos for Attica Blues,
yeah,
you start independent, and then the corporates come knocking, the majors come knocking.
Yeah,
I'm sure based upon, because marketing is about where the eyes go, right?
Yeah,
and because you had that unique thing, you had a black led, diverse,
yeah,
underground, funky, cool running crew with the kind of like, you know, are they, you know, it was almost like running parallel to grime, wasn't it? So you had, you know, when the corporates came knocking, I'm sure they did.
Yeah.
What were those conversations? Did you have flashbacks to Attica Blues? Like, hold on, I've been around these tables before.
Yeah, I definitely had flashbacks of all the other experiences that I'd had with, you know, corporate organizations and brands where I had got in naively. So this time I'd already pinpointed. I was like, right, I'm working with a lot of young kids. You know, we need a space where these kids can meet, because my whole thing was like, you know, running empowered me. And I could see that, you know, if you could empower a young person through running, suddenly like opportunities would start popping off. Because if you're a young person and you walk into a meeting and you're like, and you know, you can outrun anyone in that room. Like, you know, if you know that basically if I'm getting chased, it's going to be 13 miles before you stop me.
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of when you're working with young people where they're like, oh, I've been to New York for the first time, but not, you know, through running, not through music, but actually through running. So when I sat in those meetings, I was just like, look, you know, the company I want to work with Nike. That's the company that I want to work with. And, you know, I had a friend, A-Side, who now works in Virgil and Kanye's camp. He's kind of in that world now. But he was like, look, you know, they've got this community space in Hackney, and, you know, we're not really doing very much community stuff. Do you want to come down and have a conversation? Again, I knew A-Side from DJing from Blacktronica, from the music stuff I was doing there. And we go down and have the meeting, and they're like, how much money do you want? And I'm like, I don't want any money. And at that point, everyone in the room really started to listen to what I had to say. Yeah. Because I just flipped it. I was just like, it's not about the money. Because I know how much my thing is worth. And there's no amount of money that you can put down that's going to be equal the value that I know that I can bring to this situation. Because again, what people don't realize is Run Them is the type of people that we were getting to run. No one had been able to get those people to run or engage with sport in a way since they've left school.
Yeah.
So we, you know, our, you know, list of the people who were in Run Them, you know, is endless. It's like, you know, there's so many people who've gone on to do amazingly bigger and greater things.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but looking at it, I mean, I'm sure in there you've got artists, you've got entrepreneurs, you've got bankers, you've got academics. I'm sure you've got medics in there. It's the most diverse.
Yeah, I wanted to have something that was a real reflection of what it's like to live in London.
Oh.
So literally what I would do, I would sit there and be like, right, okay, we need some more models. Let me go speak to some modeling agencies and see what they're saying. And we need some more bankers, because we've got kids in there who don't know about money. So we need some bankers who can help them learn about money. So I'd go and recruit some bankers. We need some artists. And I literally would be kind of like, you know, looking at the crew and be like, okay, what are we missing? Let's go and get some more of those people.
Yeah. I hear that. So you've grown Run Them now. You're doing the marathons.
Yeah.
And I see similarities with what Stick was doing with Dead Prez, and just kind of bringing the conversation of wellness back to primarily the Black community, but also a generation of people, a hip hop generation, if you will, not necessarily solely Black, but people who get it.
Yeah.
I also noticed you start mentoring people, young people. I'm not saying, I mean, visibly you could see that they've taken the Run Dem Crew model and put it into calisthenics and put it into biking. And I
Yeah,
see
with
these
bike,
people who shout you out online. And I see,
yeah, bike them, swim them. Yeah, you
yeah,
know,
yeah. So bike, you got bike them. So you got all these that have
yeah,
taken that run them model and disrupted literally the same model. So it's almost
yeah,
like a franchise of disruption.
yeah.
Amazing. So so you've hit this place now. I've run them. What made you change a lane, or did you just add another lane? What was the next step for you?
The next step was because invariably what happens when you create anything as a disruptor is you create a blueprint that then gets absolved into the mainstream. So what happens is you kind of suddenly look at mainstream running and you realize, like, okay, so they've taken influence from crew
Yeah,
culture and the clothes, the
yeah,
shoes, the way they talk about it, the way they advertise it, the type of people that are in the ads, the type of races, like the race experience. And then at that point, you're just like, okay, what are we going to do now? Because we're supposed to inform where the culture is going. This is what
yeah,
people don't understand. As Black people, we used to inform where the culture went, not replicate what was already happening. If you think about it, if you think that back in the day, it's kind of like it wasn't like someone was like, okay, guys, what you do is you buy a baggy pair of trousers and then you pin roll the bottom with an expensive pair of socks and some trainers. That was something that we just did as the part of the culture.
yeah. And
It was,
those Argyle socks were really expensive.
they were super expensive. So now I kind of got to the point and I was like, right, we've done everything we can do with running, because ultimately the thing about the running industry is it still has a long way to go in terms of change. And I don't have the patience. I'm like, okay, we've done it for 15 years. So if the changes that need to happen are still not happening, we need to attack this from a different way. So that's why we started the radio station. We were just like, right, we've come from music. And when I look at radio and internet radio in particular, there are lots of stations. The programming is very similar. And I feel like there's certain bits of music that are being marginalized. So just start my own radio station, like run them radio. Bam. Let's go and do that. And then off the back of that, now it's kind of this idea of kind of looking at wellness and being like, okay, how can we remix the wellness world? Because ultimately the people who need wellness the most don't have access to it, don't think it's for them. And what's really interesting, if you think about the events of the last 48 hours, Will Smith, Oscars, Chris Rock, you're just like, if you can watch that and then still not think that we need wellness in our lives, then you maybe are missing the point.
Yeah, and the science is clear and the evidence is clear around concept of black rage, and a lot has been spoken about it. It hasn't been brought to the forward of culture. Now as a society, we're talking a lot more about trauma and adverse childhood experiences, and interesting. My own daughter said to me that the thing about my generation is we have a name for everything. Where me and you, we didn't have a name.
Yeah.
So you'll have children now, primary school age, talking about being triggered and parameters and boundaries, and they've got real sector language around well-being, but we didn't have that language.
No,
but I think so interesting. So, but it's a natural blend, right, from the running into the wellness thing, because and apologies if it's something that brought, because I saw one of your campaigns where, and as I said, apologies in advance, where I believe one of your own team lost their life and things like that, which clearly, I saw a big campaign about honoring that person, and I could feel the love, and and then I also saw I saw in the post George Floyd, and I'm kind of skipping years here. One of the things that you said in your post was, why do they hate us? And that question, why are we hated?
I mean, I don't, especially, that whole period of time is really interesting, because if you're around our age, you've seen it before. You've seen the protests, you've seen the marches, you've seen the, people, the outpourings. So it was really interesting, that whole period of time, because I think for people of our age, it kind of brought back a lot of pain and a lot of hurt.
Yeah.
And then also, particularly coming from the music industry, where, you know, I know people who've got like some of the best collections of black music in the world, the most extensive collections of black music in the world, who during that whole George Floyd period were just kind of waking up in a blind panic, ringing my phone, being like, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to do. I'm just like, well, go and listen to some of that music that you've accumulated in that museum of yours. And maybe that might give you some of your answers. But I just, you know, it still to this day baffles me. I'm not like, I mean, I understand why, because when you look at how we are portrayed in the media and just, you know, even the way some of the avenues that we are pushed towards as ways of expressing ourselves, I can see why that invokes fear in people and mistrust and prejudice and all of that stuff. I can definitely see it. Definitely.
And I want to go back to what you said about the mainstream initially being resistant to culture change. But once they understand, whether it be through running, whether it be through music, whether it be through fashion, once they understand the hack and how to monetize it and what it sounds and feels like, they run with it, which makes the curator obsolete. I saw recently on an awards show, the grime song, the drill song of the year was sponsored by a building society. And I sat and watched it. And I said, look at this. And the drill song of the year goes to sponsored by so-and-so building society. And I was like, look at this.
Yeah.
You know, look at the dichotomy. Look at how, because now with popular culture, we're going to sign off the fact that it's full of misogyny. We're going to sign off the fact that it's full of black on black violence. We're going to sign off the fact that it's full of pain and trauma and substance misuse and all that. We could list it, but now the corporate can align themselves to the culture.
Yeah.
And which is really, really interesting about corporate social responsibility. But once you create, as I believe you are as a creator, Seth Godin talks about this, that not to hide your work because you'll run out of ideas. Yeah. And there's that sweet place, isn't there, between hiding your work so it doesn't get stolen, but also you need to give this art to the world.
Yeah, you have to give it to the world, but also you have to know when to move on. You know, when I have like 50-year-old men, friends of mine, who are still telling me about their mixtape that they're going to release, I'm like, dude, it's kind of, you might want to start putting that energy into something else, because actually it's almost too late now.
Yeah.
You know, when I look at the state of kind of, you know, black music now, and obviously I do think to myself, man, imagine if Attica were around now and I was in my 20s and we were doing it now, it'd be a rap. It'd be absolute rap. But actually, there are other places where I can go and put my energy, and that's something I've been very good at over the years, is reinventing myself and knowing when to bow out of something and to get into something new, and not being afraid of being an early adapter or being the only one, and not being concerned with how my peers or my culture looks at what I'm doing.
Yeah, totally.
When I started running, people were like, black people don't run. I was like, well, I do.
And
you know, and I
so the Weta does, and you know, some of the greatest long distance runners of all time do. But are you saying black British? You're saying black British men don't run? Is that what they were trying to say to you?
Well, they were just saying that. They were just saying in general, black men don't run. And I was just like, you know, it's the same way as like black people don't do countryside. That's nonsense. We come from the countryside. We come from the earth. Our parents and our grandparents have come from tending the earth. But then you come to, you know, another country and you're in an urban environment where you don't have access to the earth.
Yeah.
And then, you know, and in order to go into nature, that means taking yourself out of the small community that you're in. And we've all had that experience where you walk into the pub and everyone stops as you walk in. Some people can take it, some people can't. So we've got this thing now where it's like, oh, you know, we don't do outside, we don't do nature. We all want a swimming pool, but we actually don't know how to swim.
And it speaks to. I remember I said to my own father once, "Dad, can you swim?" And he was like, "A Jamaica me come from, you know, right?" And I was, you understand, because we'd never gone swimming baths, we'd never done it, but
yeah,
and even with the whole slightly back to the running and the fact that Jamaica is only what 2.9 million people, but when it comes to that 100 meters, we're going up against with countries that are 300 million, 1 billion, and still dominating, and no one wants to know why. And it's about culture. It's about the culture. It's not about, people say, yeah, it's yam and banana, and it's yeah, that's a tweak, but culture, because what they don't also talk about, Charlie, as you know, is how many thousands of people sign up for the national spelling competition in Jamaica.
yeah.
Because if you're that spelling done, you know, that's like, you're a celebrity. So culture is important, but what you're saying is that sometimes you've got to be the one who creates the culture, right? Is that what you're saying here?
Yeah, you sometimes when there's no, you know, the culture isn't there yet, so you have to go and make it. And that's, you know, if I look at hip hop, it was a culture that was created. It wasn't something that was, you couldn't just buy it off the shelf. It was people taking little elements and adding it in. And you know,
and it's funny, you know, I was saying to one of my people the other day that it's interesting, and I hate sounding like the old men in the room, but all you needed to was just have a little splash of the culture to be accepted. So you might just have been able to have one feeler headband and you were in.
Yeah.
Everything else could have been terrible, but just a little splash, right? You didn't need to have the full thing, because only a few people were blessed with that. Just a splash of the culture, right? A Bjornborg, Theodora shoe bag, just you know, like a splash. And I think, you know, we are a lot of us who are analog humans that have walked into a digital world, whereas these young people, they've only ever known the digital. I want to kind of come up to where you're at now. So because I can see obviously the trajectory. So I think it was Insta one day, and I saw you. I'm not saying you were doing a downward dog, but you were doing this thing, right? And I was like, is my man doing yoga? Yeah. And so tell me about the yoga piece.
The yoga came into my life because I broke my body. Because what happens when you swap one passion for another, or one addiction for another, is that you go very hard in the new thing that you find. So with the running, suddenly I found something new that I was really good at, and I've got this global family, and we're all discovering that we're really good at this. And what I mean by that is, kind of, when we first started Run Them, I think the fastest guy had run a marathon in 5.5 hours. At this point, we've got people in the crew. They, you know, last time they ran London Marathon, they ran it in 2 hours 49. No, 2 hours 29.
High level.
So if you think, like, you know, most people, you know, elite pack are coming in at 2:10. This guy's coming in, like, you know, just 10 minutes after that lot. So, you know, what happened is that we found this new thing that we fell in love with, and then a lot of us kind of deeply invested ourselves in it and running a lot of marathons, and we're still kind of making it up as we go along. And then various people are getting injured, and when you get injured, what you start to miss is the energy that they bring into the crew. So I felt, first of all, there was a responsibility for myself to kind of be a bit more aware about my body, so I could really help others. Secondly, I needed that help myself, because my body was getting older and, you know, less flexible. And yoga was kind of prescribed to me as part of my rehabilitation for an injury. But again, I just fell in love with new environment, new people, new way of speaking, new attitude to life, and the humbling of the ego again, where you're just like, you know, my girl would be like, yeah, let's go yoga. I'd be like, yeah, man, it's going to go. I lift weights. I'll be fine. You know what I mean? 10 minutes in, you're on the floor. She's literally floating on her mat next to you. You're just like, what's going on? I don't understand. But I think the thing that I really got from yoga is the idea of being present, being in the moment and enjoying the moment. And I think that's one of the things that we as people, we don't do. Our parents are always thinking about, okay, well, if I move this chess piece here, that will enable me to do this. If I work this extra hour here, it will allow me more money to do this. We're always thinking about the moment ahead. As a DJ, you're always trying to better the DJ set you did before. Everyone else is really loving this record, but I'm thinking 4 records ahead.
Yeah.
You know, as a musician, you're always trying to make a record that's greater, better than the record you made yesterday. I want to make a more banging beat than what I made before.
Yeah.
So I realized that for a large part of my life, these amazing experiences were happening to me, around me, and I wasn't enjoying them. I wasn't present. I was always thinking about tomorrow. And being on the yoga mat just allowed me to chill and actually be rebellious in the way that I can be like, okay, I'm taking an hour out of my day to go and be on my yoga mat. Please, world, do not disturb me during this time. I'm taking an hour out of my day to meditate, to turn the world out, to tell the world, no, you don't have 24-hour access to me. Actually, you could have access during this time, but during this time, this is my time. And it just allowed me to learn to be present.
Yeah.
Being present is really, really important, really important, because
in a noisy world that we're in now,
there's a lot of stuff that goes on, and we spend so much time looking at what other people are doing and comparing ourselves to other people, and blaming the universe for the things it hasn't delivered to us, when actually there's amazing things that happen to us on a daily basis that we take for granted.
Yeah, it's one of the.
We take it for granted that we're black, and how amazing that is. And despite the fact of what the world and the universe tries to deliver to you, there's something really amazing. It's just about where we come from and the culture that that's within our DNA. Special.
And that seeing the sacred in the ordinary concept. That's what you person might see as ordinary. And brass tacks, we're talking about being able to wake up, being able to walk, being able to breathe without, being able to giving that thanks and bringing and embracing that.
I say to young cats, I'm just like, dude, like, it's all been well, making amazing banging tune in your bedroom when you're 18 and smashing it when you're 25. But I'm 51. I'm still doing it. I'm still out here. So, and that is a blessing to me. I'm just like, I can't believe that I'm actually got to this point where I'm still alive. I'm still doing what I'm doing. I still got that enthusiasm and curiosity for life. People are still interested in what I have to offer. That's really amazing. Let me enjoy that and stop thinking, oh, I should be here, I should be doing that. Why am I not doing this? Why is that opportunity not happening to me? Why did that person? This is the reason why I started putting these parameters around the type of work I will do, who I will work with, and in what type of situations. Because I'm just like, actually, you start to realize that sometimes you allow yourselves to be put in situations where you're being made to feel away.
Yeah. Totally. And if you're an artist, it's even worse.
It's even worse.
It's even worse if you're an artist. And when people talk about artists, they think about it's an art. Artists, being an artist is subjective, right? Everything is art if you look close enough. How people design things, how people, how they lay a table. Everything is art. And I think for me, a lot of people become frustrated artists because they don't share the art with the world. They're constantly waiting for permission, waiting for it to get signed off, looking at the likes, looking at the retweets, in that new language. So we obviously, there's a pattern here. You didn't stop at just being at the mat. You became a teacher, right?
Yeah, qualified. Because I went on a kind of yoga retreat kind of thing, and I had such a profound. Listen, I went on this yoga retreat, and I met these 2 dudes who I know they were delivery drivers for Vita Coco for a coconut water company. I go to this retreat and I meet these guys and they're there and I think they come to deliver some drinks and they're like, no, they're like, we're not delivery drivers anymore. We're adventurers.
Yeah. I
was like, what are you talking about? It's just like, oh yeah, we go on adventures now. And I'm thinking they're kind of like, oh, you just walked from Land's End to John O'Groats. This dude's like, look, we just rode the Atlantic. And this is like your mate who's like he's never done anything physical in his life, and you suddenly see him 2 weeks later, and he's like, oh, "Yeah, man, just climbed Everest." And they rode the Atlantic, and the way they were telling me, they were driving around in a delivery truck one day, and they were just like, "We hate our job. Why are we doing it?" One of them says to the other one, "What have you always wanted to do?" He says, "I've always wanted to ride the Atlantic," as a joke. His mate goes, "Bam, let's go and do it." They get a boat. They have 6 weeks of rowing lessons. And then they go and they row the Atlantic. Day one, they capsize. Man falls out the boat. He's 30 foot away from the boat, comes up to the surface, sees the boat. He's still tied, checks his leg. He's still tied in. They swim over to the boat. They get back in and they continue on their way and they row the Atlantic. And I'm just like, okay, this is blowing my mind right now. Like, you're the delivery drivers. So when I'm looking around this room, I'm seeing all these people, like super inspirational people who've all been brought together to kind of have an experience of yoga. And I realized that there's no one else that looks like me. And more importantly, I suddenly realized that there's no one out there who's really trying to get people like me into these type of spaces. So I'm going to go and retrain to be a teacher. And all my friends are like, this guy. It's one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life.
And you know what's interesting in that whole post George Floyd tragedy, I actually saw a campaign by, I can't remember who it was, about decolonizing yoga. And how deep it was because a lot of these they were talking about, a lot of them go to these ashrams and so on out there in India and do a few week course and get certified and come back. But we actually forget the origin of yoga and the people who brought it and how they are not the teachers no more, and these spaces aren't feeling inclusive, and there's a lot of tote bags and a lot of kale, right? But there's no diversity, right? No.
Yeah.
And so I hear what you're saying. So and I've dabbled. I'm not going to lie, I've dabbled, right? And it was welcoming, and it was. I did look up once, and the yoga teacher was on their phone, and it kind of broke my heart because I thought they're supposed to be levitating, right? But they're human. But I see the value in it. So now we're 20. We've hit the lockdown.
Yeah, lockdown is where the DJing returned.
Well, we saw what D-Nice did, right?
Yeah.
And D-Nice didn't do anything except it didn't do anything amazing apart from turn on the power and be D-Nice, right? And you're probably familiar with D-Nice's story more than anyone else, that he went from BDP and then hit a low, picked up a camera, picked up a video camera, was sleeping on his sister's couch, all that story. I love, these journeys. And now he's probably one of the, if you talk about, he's probably one of the top 5 sought after, Jazzy Jeff and D-Nice. But what he did was he just turned the power on. And done D-Nice, and it took Queston a bit, and I saw a lot of the DJs, a lot of people that I'm not a DJ, but a lot of the people that I knew that were in that world turn the power on. Because let me be honest with you, Charlie, a lot of people put their decks in the loft.
Of course, definitely.
You get me? Put them in the loft, and I a lot of my friends who are DJs, I said, how can you put your decks in the? You're an artist. An artist doesn't put the paintbrushes away. So it became this: who can do the Premier scratch? Who can do this? Who can do that? And a lot. But then I saw a lot of people blow off those. In some cases, 1210s. In others, obviously Serato. And there was like a rebirth, right?
Yeah. And I think it was really important because ultimately the whole world stopped and everyone was at home. And so I think what's happened over the last 2 years is people have learned how to appreciate music again in different formats. Because I think the reason why a lot of people stopped is you were actively being discouraged to DJ and play vinyl and use turntables. because you turn up to the club and the turntables hadn't been serviced and they're, you know, a bit broke, a bit knackered, and it was kind of wasn't fun to DJ on turntables anymore. And that's why I think a lot of people moved to CDJs and USB and Serato, because it was convenient. I think what's happened over lockdown is you've now got people realizing the importance of vinyl and sharing it. And also what people are realizing is that you know, you can DJ, there are many different ways that you can DJ now, and that's okay. So whether you're using a controller, USB, CDJ, turntable, Serato, computer, iPhone, Spotify, whatever, it's okay. Because at the very time we needed music, as you said, someone turned on the power and had, you know, 3 million people tuned in on that one day. It was like an amazing day for music.
Was that the bit? Okay.
It was a nice day. And he wasn't even using turntables, he was using the controller. But I think,
and a lot of the things you mentioned, I'm not aware. A lot of the tech that you mentioned, I'm not aware of. But what I did notice was the conversations. Obviously, other things that were born out of it, the conversations that community had around, you know, and
people were allowed to have their own opinion, because all the major people who kind of had been quite noisy and hogging the airwaves kind of went silent. So it allowed new pirates to kind of start and do their thing.
So Run Dem Radio kind of at the same time, or was it kind of? Or did
we had started working on the idea in 2019, and then it stalled a bit because of the pandemic, obviously. Yeah. And then we kind of, you know, we got off the ground, and you know, now it's an experiment. You know, it's kind of, because again, my thing is kind of, what is radio? Radio can be whatever you want it to be, and that's my big thing, is about kind of incubating the idea and experimenting on different ways that you can, of what radio can be.
I hear that. So there's a beautiful saying. I don't know if it applies to you, but it says, "Don't die with a book in you." Right, and I think you've birthed many books. There might be a book in you. I'm sure there's a poetry book.
There's definitely a book in me. The problem I had when I was hard on, you know, around about 2016, 2017, when I was really being courted by publishers and everyone wanted, you know, the big checks are flying around and they're talking about me writing a book, is they wouldn't allow me to write the book that I wanted to write. Which was some of the things you mentioned today. The hacks. It's the hacks that, okay. Yeah. So I don't necessarily just want to write a book that's kind of, and then I did this, and then I did that, and then I did this, because for me, it's about, you know, my main thing at the moment is like, right, young people, the playing field was not level before the pandemic, but it's really not level now. The pandemic has happened. You've got a problem because the intergenerational mentoring doesn't exist anymore. So it's not like, you know, you can be like 19 and go to the 40-year-old, you know, guy and be like, right, I really want to get into DJing, you know, what do I need to look out for? Because a 40-year-old guy is looking at the 20-year-old being like, oh, he's a threat, so I can't help him. Yeah. There's a lot of that blocking going on. So subsequently, you've got, like, you know, a younger generation who are like, okay, well, forget about the elders. I don't need to hear anything the elders have got to say. So really, at the moment, my thing is about trying to write a book that incorporates all of the stories, experiences, and gives it in, you know, lessons that can be acted upon. And it's, you know, my thing is, you know, do I really want to go and have to play that publisher's dance? Or do I want to kind of make steps to kind of publishing at least a chapter of it myself? Yeah. Which is probably more likely the way that I will go. Well, one thing I do know, the audio version will be narrated by yourself. I can hear that already. Yeah. The audio version will be sick. Totally. I mean, look, we could be here and break bread for all night, and I just want. I'm very conscious and value your time. There's a question that I leave with people. I'm going to add 2 extra ones to you for obvious reasons, but there's a question I ask for people before we end the program and the shows is: you're going on a 3-day trip. What food will you take? Right? What books will you read or recommend everyone to read? And finally, what would be the mantra that serves you, or that statement, or that Okay.
that strap line. I mean, you've probably mentioned a powerful one at the start. But so firstly, what food would you take for those 3 days?
I'm taking plantain.
That we can move on to number 2 now. So
No,
because we know
pronunciation of plantain, not plantain.
yeah. Well, I hear you.
And I grew up in a plantain household.
Yeah, we're going planting.
I'm very good plantain. Yeah, my book I'm going to take is The Art of War.
Steve, Sun Tzu.
Yeah. Like amazing.
Okay, I'm confusing it with War of Art.
Yeah, The Art of War I'm going to take because I just think it's a good. It's one of those books that everyone should read.
Yeah, totally.
There is a reason why it's one of the most read books in prison. It's kind of, you know, and mantra would be not how fast you go, it's how you cross the finish line. You know, that's kind of that's the thing I would say. Yeah, it's not how fast you go, it's how you cross the finish line. It's not everyone's in their own. Run your own race. Distance stays the same. And if anything, celebration is the start line. Everything else after that is just, is the party.
Yeah, and I often talk about this in our work, where the person who if you look at the races, we always talk about Usain Bolt, and he's the Don, or was the Don, but what he created. But I always noticed the guy who was last, who dipped his head at the finishing line. Yeah. And he didn't have the Ferrari endorsements and Richard Branson on speed dial and Puma all over him. But he dipped his head at the finishing line. I asked that question why. He said because he was there for his PB. He weren't there. Form was telling him that he's not really gonna. And it was a matter of, as you know, it was second. It was less than seconds in some cases.
Yeah.
I'm gonna add 2 more questions because you've got the vinyl backdrop. So top 5 MCs of all time.
Okay, this is easy. Rakim. I'm gonna put Rakim in there because basically he's such an influence on so many other MCs, and he just basically opened the door for a new way of rhyming, a new way of putting words together, and a new way of carrying yourself as an MC and priding yourself on being a lyricist. Number 2 is a hard one because I'd like to put Nas in.
Oh, is this chronological? All right, we're going one.
Well, I'll try not to, but I'd like to put Nas in because Illmatic, I think if you only ever listen to one hip hop album in your time, then Illmatic, you have to listen to that album because that basically summarizes a time in culture, a time in history, a time in New York that will never ever come back. It's like a perfect Polaroid camera of 90s hip hop culture at its finest.
Most people would agree with that, but when it sealed it for me? When I heard that New York State of Mind was done in one take.
Yeah.
When I heard that one, that was a pull up the handbrake moment. What did you just say?
Yeah.
When I heard that one for a 18-year-old, 19-year-old. Yeah, cool. Okay, so it's not chronological, but you've got
chronological.
You've got Rakim and then Nas.
I Rakim and Nas. I'm gonna put Unknown T.
Talk to me.
Yeah, I'm gonna put Unknown T in there because he's gonna go in my all-time current top 5. I just think his cadence, the tone of his voice, and again the way he plays and bends words and makes them his own is really interesting. And I think what happens a lot of time is you speak to people who are around my age who are kind of like, who have stopped listening to the MCs that are coming through. So they just dismiss it as being noise, at which point you sound like your parents. And I think if you're a hip hop lover and you appreciate lyrics, your ears have to be open at all times, including the new voices that are coming through. And it's important that we encourage those young MCs coming through because they might be talking about chefing and drilling at 19, but with some guidance and acknowledgement as well, by the time they get to 25, their minds might start opening up in the same way that our minds started opening up.
Interesting. Yeah.
So I think it's important to kind of encourage people like that. So if it's not Unknown T, I'm going to put Chipmunk in there because again, I think the way that he plays with language and words and this idea of his voice being an instrument. Because for me, it's not just the lyrics; it's also about the delivery.
All right, so you've gone for 4 there, and you've gone left field because you brought some young British men in there. I'm not familiar with Unknown T's work or anything like that, but I hear you. So the 5th then after the 5th. Then?
I'm gonna KRS-One would have been in there, but I'm a bit suspect of the way he's rolling, so he can't go in. So I'm actually gonna put in. This is really good. This is a hard one. I'm actually going to put in, if we're going for mainstream MCs, I'm going to put in Guru. Because I think Guru, again, wrote some no, actually, forget Guru. I'm putting in Biggie Smalls. In fact, Biggie Smalls is going to be my number 1. And everyone else.
You know what? Do you know, interesting. Guru would have been 61 now.
Yeah.
61. I think Chuck D's 61.
Yeah.
And those, and we're just nerding out now. I'm not interested in who's watching this and who's not. Well, I am interested, but there might be. But what I'm saying here is, his dad was a judge.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is a lot of those MCs who we grew up on were actually from middle class backgrounds.
Yeah.
Parents were doctors, PhD holders. I was listening to Chuck D's interview the other day, like academic parents, and it's only now you understand the words that these guys used. Even Biggie Smalls' mum was a teacher, right?
Yeah.
There you go. So so very, very, very interesting. I'm going to leave you with one more thing.
It's a long time since someone's asked me that question in my top 5 MCs. That's quite a hard question for me to answer.
Yeah, and I can see, as I said, some of the ones that you mentioned there, I'm not familiar with, but I also understand that what you said there about sometimes when we write off young people because we don't agree with what they're saying today, those same young people, just like Malcolm, just like some of the people who didn't, how they started off isn't how they ended.
Is that how
and maybe ended? And we maybe shouldn't close the door to them.
Yeah,
maybe should always give those advice.
Because we don't ignore, one of the things which is really empowering for anyone is when you feel like you've been seen by people who are older than you, that they know that you exist. And I do worry about this thing where we're just kind of like, oh yeah, young people, they're just all, they're just doing this and they're doing that. And so therefore I'm just dismissing them. I'm like, actually, like there's some amazing stuff to be learned from young people in the way that they operate. And actually, I feel like as elders, we have a responsibility to not just give up on them, but actually to be present and to be like, I see you. And if you do need help or advice or guidance or some books or some music to open your mind up, let me know. Because we often will say to like, oh, you're an MC, so you should know about Rakim. What do you mean you don't know who, Grandmaster Kaz is? What do you mean you've never seen Wild Style? What do you mean you don't know about Rocksteady? And then if you ever speak to a young person, I don't think it's because they're not interested. It's because, where do I go? Okay, so I'm going to go to Google and I'm going to type in Rakim and there's going to be millions of things that come up. Where do I start? And we don't have these elders who are like, right, okay, so you call yourself an MC. In my opinion, not that it's, I'm God, but here's a good place for you to start. Maybe you should check this out. Once you check this out, maybe go and check out some John Coltrane,
And that's it. And that's everything, isn't it? I mean, that's everything. That's in business, that's in health, that's in spirituality. You know what's interesting? There's no Rakim without John Coltrane. There's no Rakim without jazz because, very few people know that, songs like, I believe, Know the Ledge, he actually played the drums on.
Yeah.
And obviously Naz's father and, growing up with an instrument in the house and an artist. Very, very interesting. So I'm gonna leave one final question before we call it an evening. And I'm gonna come and visit you at the
Please do.
station at some point.
Please
We're
do.
gonna
Yeah,
have
yeah,
some
definitely.
planting. But the last question is this: if you could shadow someone
Yeah.
for 24 hours, who's past, present, or past or present, someone they don't necessarily have to be still here. Who would
Yeah.
you having been at proximity or worked with? You know,
Yeah.
who's that person you would love to spend 24 hours with?
You know what? At the moment, I would love to spend 24 hours with Swizz Beats.
Interesting. Is he at that yard or in the studio?
I mean, you know, just anywhere. I would just like, you know, I'd love to go to dinner with Swizz Beats because I think he's, you know, a very interesting character. I think he's been on a really interesting life journey. I love how family orientated he's become. I love, you know, the family unit that he's kind of, you know, at the heart of. I love his creative drive and his curiosity for life, because ultimately what he's doing, you know, he's into his art. So he's got into the art, he's into the cars. So he's getting into the cars. He's still got his foot in the music, but he's pursuing other avenues of expression and excellence. And I
he got
really
his masters, didn't he? He got his masters at Harvard, I believe, or some one of those.
Harvard, and he stayed on campus, you know, and I really I admire people like that, because there are lots of other people who, you know, who are maybe more obvious characters to spend time with. But I just think he's an interesting character. And I think in my experience, what often happens is when you choose the obvious person has been trained to make you feel special for the hour that they're with you. But after that hour is done, you're out the picture. Whereas a lot of times it's the unobvious people who you actually form friendships with.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, I would like to just say, when we listen back to this interview, there's going to be some mixes and some dub plates that were dropped. And I'd like to thank you on behalf of, you know, the Equal Equity and the National Youth Agency. This has probably been one of the conversations that people could take notes in, and I thank you for that. Not to say that the others haven't been powerful, but I know that because you've been in multiple lanes, spaces, challenges, you know what it's like to be the only black guy in the room, and then flip that and become a comrade to some and a teacher to others. And you know, I'd like to say, you know, I wish you all the best for your whatever you're pursuing. I'm looking forward to the book. You've already written it, as far as I'm concerned. It's already there. You've done the work, and you know, hopefully, you know, our paths can cross in due course.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think it's important. I think the work that you do is really important. You know, I find it fascinating, and I think it's, you know, there's definitely more conversations that we need to have.
Definitely.
You know,
stay blessed. You might even see a yoga mat soon. You never know. And you know, have a good one, and we'll be in touch.
Most definitely, man.
That's Charlie Dark People, Run Dem Crew.
Nice one.
Attica Blues, Blacktronica, Yoga Done. Oh yeah, I've did the list endless. Thank you. Stay blessed. Thank you all. Speak soon. Don't forget tomorrow's session. Whites practitioners in black spaces, 7 p.m. live on YouTube. Stay blessed. Peace.
Nice one.